created monsters. come through.
Recording in progress.
Hello? No.
Yes, sir, we can hear you, sir.
Morning, sir.
How you doing? You guys can hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. Set the camera on there. Yeah, man. Okay, welcome, guys. All right. So we're doing another lecture today, and we're moving into a new area. So, we are kind of leaving behind. What was the last thing we did? We did SketchUp. We touched on 3D elements. We're gonna continue with 3D. But guess what? Now we're gonna kind of move into two different areas, right? We are gonna do more advanced 3D techniques, and then we are also gonna we're gonna continue in InDesign. All right. Anybody here have ever used InDesign?
No, sir.
Nope. Not even open it. Open the program. Okay. All right. Well, we're gonna test that out. Right before we do that though, I wanna go through some kind of a preparation with you guys first. So, let me see how many persons are here. Participate. Oh, well, I got most people here. That is great stuff. All right. Okay, great. All right, you guys can see my screen. No, not yet. You can't see my screen yet. You can see my screen now.
Yes, sir.
All right. So we want to talk a little bit about desktop publishing. All right. So we've started with Photoshop. So we did more things that has to do with images. Then we went on to vector, and then we went on to 3D. This thing always gets louder. right? And then we went on to 3D, right? So now we're gonna move into desktop publishing. Right. Let's full screen that. All right, so desktop publishing is perhaps maybe the term is new to some of us, but it has actually been around for a while, and we InDesign is a program that we use to do desktop publishing. Come on. It is really the integration of text and graphic, and it starts to look at page layout. The funny thing is, when we talk about desktop publishing, something that it is, I would say it is definitely not, is a Word document. I can safely say everybody in here has done some kind of Word editing before, right? That's a safe bet, right? So desktop publishing is, think of it as kind of the Avengers of graphics, right? Everybody in here most people in here probably watch Avengers already, so they know what we're talking about, right? I use that analogy because maybe some of us hasn't quite understand what BIM is. Anybody here ever heard the term BIM? Building Information Modeling?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. A lot of terms today. So you're going to learn more about this next semester when you move on to do what was it? Documentation, architectural documentation. But in a nutshell, it essentially combines data from all these different industries under one big umbrella, right? Including information from the architect. And it creates this virtual model. And that virtual model houses information from the contractor, the client, the designer, the structural engineer, all these things. So it's great stuff, exciting stuff, but you're going to tackle that later. However, in the world of graphics, InDesign is kind of that central hub that houses the image that has been edited by the graphic designer. It houses all of the illustrations that has been done, all of the text that has been created, all of the verbiage, and think of it as, you know, putting all of these elements together in this one hub, and then you publish it from that hub. So when we use the term publish, we're not just talking about a book, because as most of you know who have cell phones, you also read content that is published on the internet as well. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
Oh. Let me mute that. Right. So you have all of these bits of information that come together in desktop publishing, and it comes together in this software, and then it is outputted in many different ways, right? Now most of us know what word processing is already. Granted, we don't type on typewriters anymore, but in its simplest fashion, a word processing is literally just typing a document. Okay, I'm going to assume that everybody here knows what a typewriter is, right? I don't think I am that old, right? Anybody does not know what a typewriter is? No answer. That means everybody knows. So, let's get this. So, come on, where are you, Zoom? There you are. All right. Now, think about those days when you used to type on a typewriter. Though those days don't exist anymore. But a typewriter couldn't do graphics, and it couldn't do, I mean, in most cases, it probably couldn't even change font. It literally just types a printed document, and that's what it did. However, back in those days, in order to get any kind of documentation, right? And this is before the advent of word process, of desktop. Well, I would call it before Microsoft Word was mainstream, right? The process of getting out anything apart from a simple typed document involved somebody sitting at a desk and putting photos together, and it was just a very long process. So that process was called desktop publishing, right? And typing on the typewriter was just word processing, right? So come on, phone. There we go. Right. So nowadays it's kind of hard to distinguish it because a word processor like Word can do so many things, and it's like a very thin line between word processing and desktop publishing, right? But there is still a kind of difference between them. Nowadays, when you see a document typed, it still does look very different from a magazine, right? So word processing is software is used to compose documents, while desktop publishing software is used to, I would say, finish documents. It combines graphic and text primarily, and the software kind of promotes this. Anybody here have tried to like mess around with graphics in Word? I mean, you can, but I don't know if it has ever annoyed somebody, like you're trying to get this picture in the right place and it's pushing your document, your paragraphs all over the place. You insert a picture here and and then it's dropping off the screen. Anybody ever get that annoyance when using Word yet? Right. So that's kind of like what Word does, and when you're meeting up against that brick wall, it's because you're trying to use a word processing application to the desktop publishing, right? And in the world of desktop publishing, there's really no limits to what you can do with text and images, right? But Word kind of have these structured things that kind of hinder you. So even if you put these two on the same scale, you can think of word processing as being more on the less complex part. I mean, if you're doing a newspaper, magazine, or something that requires more graphics, hint, presentation boards, any kind of heavy graphic document, which is kind of what we do, then you want to be going more to the complex side of things. Think about Photoshop and Illustrator. Some of you, well, nobody uses Paint anymore. Anybody know of Paint? Remember that old time program?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right. Anybody saw the new version of Paint? It comes with Windows 10.
Yes,
Right. It's called 3D Paint, and it's actually quite interesting. I mean, I've taught my son how to use the computer on 3D Paint, and it's pretty good, but it's just nowhere near to Photoshop. So I mean, it's it's kind of similar to what I'm saying with word processing, you know. And you know, once you try to do more complex things, you need to go to a more complex program. So if I should put everything on this chart, the simplest of it all would be Notepad. Anybody know Notepad?
Sir, excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, yes, small screen blocking the words on the.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Right. Well, I fixed that. So anybody knows about Notepad?
Yes, sir.
Alright, so maybe I could say the only persons that perhaps nowadays that use Notepad is maybe somebody who does programming. Because they are required to use Notepad. But it's no. Right. So persons who are writing code and those things, they would use Notepad. And you know, they don't need to choose fonts and all of those things. They really just need to type text. Then we move up a step from that is Word, where you get some amount of graphics and all of that. And then a step above that would be Publisher. Anybody know of a program called Microsoft Publisher?
Yes, sir.
Right, so that one may not be so popular because it's kind of in this weird place between Word and then the more advanced programs like InDesign. You know, so it's in this kind of weird place. But what happens is that it is definitely, if you think about it from a cost factor, it's definitely cheaper. Because if you think of it in terms of cost, InDesign can do more, Word and Office and those programs can do less. So maybe there is a company that maybe they don't want to go all out and get InDesign, then they would get Word. But in terms of complexity, I would argue that InDesign can do more than Publisher. So we're not going to be learning Publisher in this course, even though Publisher does do desktop publishing, and that's the whole aim of it. Before InDesign was so popular, you would see persons using Microsoft Publisher to do these things. And maybe some persons still use it today, but it's, you know, it's just not as robust, is that the word? In my opinion, as InDesign. Besides, InDesign is in the whole ecosystem of Adobe, so you can be carrying programs from different different areas. So that is pretty cool as well. So today's the lines are blurred between desktop publishing and Word publishing, and many programs today can combine text and graphics. If you look on that flyer on the right hand side, right? This flyer could be made in any one of these programs. Can we all agree on that? Right? The only program that's not up there is Excel. And maybe some persons would even challenge me to say that they would do it in Excel, but I mean, that just wouldn't be reasonable. Right? But this flyer on the right could be built with any one of these programs. But which one would you use? I mean, think about it in a practical way. You might be, maybe you're a member of a community or a church, and somebody from a church say, hey, we're having a function today. Can you design me a flyer? And you might say, all right, let me just do it in Word, you know, because it's nothing big. So that's why I said the lines are kind of blurred, because some of the graphical things we can do today, we could use any one of these programs. Now, at the end of the day, you just have to take a closer look to see what the program is made for. Because the more further away you go from the core use of the program, is the harder you're going to have to work to bend the program to do your bidding. Hence that example I gave at the beginning, where persons, you might be using Word and you're trying to get this one picture in a document, and it's moving your document all over the place, things hopping around, and it's just like, ugh. Anybody have ever tried to do a multi-page document in PowerPoint? Maybe like a project. Suppose you have a project that's about 10 pages or so. Anybody ever tried to do that in PowerPoint?
Yes, sir.
Right. And how you found the process?
I say there are many templates to help out with it, so it wasn't that bad.
Wasn't that bad? True. Okay. And that's the thing. That's just the thing about all of this. It's just, it's not impossible. It's just actually not impossible to get stuff done in different programs, and this is why it is just so blurry when it comes to desktop publishing and things of that nature, because if you try hard enough, you could use any program to do anything. Now you guys are on the more advanced spectrum of desktop publishing, right? So I mean, I don't know if any of you know this, but there are a lot of architectural programs out there besides the industry standard AutoCAD and Revit and these things. Anybody ever going to like I don't know if you can do it nowadays, everything is online, but you used to could go like, I don't know, in a typical computer store, Innovative Systems, or if you're overseas and you walk into a pharmacy, and you see these programs that's called like 3D Home, this, interior design, that. Anybody ever see any of these third-party programs that says they do architectural drawing? Nobody have ever seen these? Okay. Well, so these interesting programs exist, but they are not the mainstream program like the AutoCAD and the Revit and these things. And for you guys who are doing the more advanced things, when you use those programs, you might say, oh, this is so lacking, because you want to do all these things and the program will allow you to do it. So this level of program that you're learning now, the great trio, Illustrator, Photoshop, and InDesign. I mean, if you know these, there is just nothing that you can't accomplish in the world of static graphics, at least. Static meaning not moving graphics like editing and those things. There's literally nothing you can't accomplish on the advanced side of graphic design if you know these three. So what I'm trying to do now is tell you is that I expect everybody to graduate from these guys up here and start using these guys down here. Right? Even for the simplest of maybe a project. Maybe you're doing something for a history assignment or whatever, and you would just bring up Word and do whatever you. I mean, definitely for slide presentations, right, PowerPoint is just fine. But when you're talking about especially stuff for your design studio, like, I definitely expect you guys to be using the programs made for designers. And that's one of the reasons why in this module we're trying to go through all of these, kind of like a crash course on all three. But not just, what we're doing is not training. It's not about primarily telling you the buttons to click. It's how you apply it in architecture. That is the key thing here. Because remember, there are many people who know to use these programs, but they're not necessarily in the field of architecture. So let's look at some of the tools that InDesign has that makes it unique, right? Now, I just take some screenshots here, and I'm going to bring up the user interface so you can see what it looks like actually. But you know, the idea of InDesign is you create these frames, and in these frames you insert picture or text. I mean, it is literally the simplest concept to grasp. And what you guys will realize when you're using InDesign is that you're not, I kind of say, you're not really going to use InDesign. And when I say that, I mean most of the heavy moving that you do, most of the editing to images, you know, most of the 3D things that you will create, and most of the illustrations that you would make with vectors, those are going to be done in the other programs. InDesign is primarily just about putting it together, right? So show you, for example, maybe in use.
I don't know if I want something to down now, right? Okay, let me check the credits.
Guys, remember to mute. Alright. I thought I had these, but they're not open. Anyway, I'll find the location of them. I'll find the location of them and open it. So that's basically what the interface looks like, right? Like that. So you open a new document here. Now, you don't, I mean, we're not going to learn how to use it in the lecture class. We'll do that in one of the practical classes. But when you open it up, it looks pretty similar to all the other applications that you see. What you will notice though is that your let me reset the workspace to essentials. There we go. Right, this is what the workspace would look like, which is a little different, but you realize if I drag this out, you realize that the toolbar is kind of similar. You still have panels that you can dock any and everywhere, and you still have a control bar at the top, right? So already you can kind of pull some similarities between them. Of course, one thing that you will definitely notice is that you don't really have an artboard. As a matter of fact, what you have is you kind of have a layout like Word now, where you have pages, and that is kind of the nature of InDesign. This is how it is actually laid out for you. So you don't control these artboards as you would in Illustrator or the canvas as you would in Photoshop. Instead, it is kind of laid out in this document method for you. Now, if you can kind of see this image here, you can see, you can kind of see the text that is here. Let's kind of highlight that. You can kind of see a heading here, and then you can, let me make this a little bigger, you can see a picture here and a text here. So in InDesign, these are what are called frames, and this is going to help us learn how to do layouts, because that's going to be super important in architecture. I don't know if any of you ever see those beautiful presentation boards that persons create in architecture. And you know, layout is a major part of this, and we're actually going to do our next exercises that are coming up is going to be based on layouts. So we're going to learn how to do layouts, and we're going to do it using your project for Design Studio. So we're actually going to use that project in InDesign to create our layouts, right? Okay, so let me close that. All right, and this is kind of what the layout of InDesign is like, where you can see pages. So right away, you know that InDesign is made for multi-page. The whole structure of InDesign is set up around that. It's not about manipulating pixels. It's not about manipulating vectors. It can manipulate big pixels to a tiny bit, and it can manipulate vectors to a average bit as well. But that's not what it's made to do. It's primarily made to control your documents. One would even say that it is perhaps more complex than Word. I mean, if you open a Word document and then you open InDesign, you're like, whoa, okay, InDesign has a host of stuff, right? Word probably has similar features, but InDesign is more design oriented. So this is what the page layout will look like. And we're going to learn how to use these things. Now, so InDesign has vector tools like Illustrator. So there's actually a pen tool and a selection tool, an indirect selection tool. But hey, let me tell you guys something. Photoshop can even do vectors. Right? Did anyone know this before?
No, sir.
Right, you can draw vector lines in Photoshop. This is why a lot of times when I do my fourth year computing class, and by that time I finished teaching. I'm not teaching about programs anymore, but persons will say, yeah, but I can do my vector in Photoshop. It's the same thing like what we said earlier. I can do that flyer in PowerPoint. It's not impossible. But as I say, nowadays, you're just going to be flooded with software. You know that saying that Apple used to have, saying there's an app for that? I mean, literally, there's an app for everything. There's a software for doing everything nowadays. And you guys are just going to be bombarded with software after software after software because, it's all coming at you. And highly likely, you're going to have overlaps. So you're going to be like, well, Word can do this too, what this does, and A can do what B does, and so forth. But the key thing is that you guys need to decide how much investment you want to put in the primary purpose of the program. So InDesign can do vector work as well, but it's not going to be as good as Illustrator. Now, there are people who use InDesign and they use it very well, and they would say, I don't need Photoshop, I don't need Illustrator, I'll just use InDesign and jump through the hoops to do what I want to do if I need to edit vectors. The proper approach is really to just do what you need to do in each one of the programs. As a matter of fact, if you look at the pricing mechanism of Adobe Pro, anybody ever go on Adobe site and look at how much it costs? No? Well, understandably so. I mean, when pricing becomes legitimate, programs become necessary, especially when you're working with an outward facing projects. What do I mean by that? Projects that's going to get, press, meaning it's going to be recognized, it's going to be in the public eye, that kind of thing, especially that kind of stuff. So it's a good idea to familiarize yourself with these aspects now. Because as a student, you might download it or you might use the student version. It doesn't really matter. But when you go in the work world and, your supervisor might look to you and say, hey, we're going to be spending $500,000. What program should we get? You don't want to recommend something that you have no idea about. You have to also keep an eye on the pricing mechanisms. But anyway, if you look at the pricing of Adobe nowadays, nowadays everything is subscription, right? In the old days, you pay one big fat money and then the program is yours for life. But nowadays, you pay a little tiny money and pay that forever. Which one you guys prefer? Any opinions on that?
Pay one money, sir.
Sorry, I pay for everything.
Sir, the subscription now we sir.
Okay. And this is a debate out there with almost every program and every service, right? I mean, but the world is going towards subscription. And I mean, if you it's a win-win lose. So it's a nice balance. If you have the money, subscription is not a good deal for you because you could afford to buy it. But the vast majority of persons in the past, they never have the money to buy. I mean, you're looking at Adobe and you're paying, I don't know, in terms of Jamaican, maybe you're paying 300,000 Jamaican for the full suite. Or maybe you pay maybe 100,000 for Photoshop. And you get what you call a perpetual license. Meaning, you buy it one time, you buy Photoshop CS6, you own CS6. No subscription. But when CS7 come out, well, after CS6 was CC. But when the new version come out, you have to buy that again. But you still have the old one. With the subscription service where you pay forever, you're always getting the latest version, but you pay a money every month. So then it becomes about efficiency. Like, okay, how much months do I need this? You know, some persons will say, I'm going to do a project for 2 months. Let me pay this service for 2 months. If you don't finish in 2 months, well, you got to pay for 3 months. There are other persons that say, you know what, I'm just going to continue to pay it. Like Netflix. Anybody here have Netflix?
Yes, sir.
Alright, so some persons here have Netflix. I mean, if Netflix said to you, you know, give me $50,000 and you can watch Netflix for 10 years. I mean, maybe some of you would take it. But maybe the vast majority of you say, no, sir, there's so much things I can spend $50,000 on. Why are we going to spend it on that? Even though you basically pay the same when you pay a subscription. But it's all about timing. But anyway, the reason I'm saying this is that Adobe has switched to a subscription-based system because it's very easy for somebody to take up 3,000 Jamaican dollars and pay for Photoshop to use it for a month. But then they need Illustrator, so they can just pay $3,000 and use Illustrator for a month to do something. So it is more accessible, but it is now a subscription. But what used to happen is, well, a company might say, let me spend $150,000 and buy Photoshop. Perpetual license, meaning it's forever. You come and work for that company and you need to do a 50-page document, and they say, well, we already buy Photoshop, you know, we're not buying any more program. And then you have to struggle through using that program to get done what you want to get done. Because the company not going to buy a new program. And because it's a company, they're not going to, of course, download the program and that kind of stuff. So this was the challenge that was facing most persons. And this is, I guess, one of the reasons why they switched to a subscription system. But I'm just telling you this to say the system is set up for you to use the right program to do the right thing. Because it's no longer impractical. In the past, it was impractical for you to buy a $200,000 program just because you need to get one little thing done. But now, you can rent it for a couple of weeks. Alright? Any questions, guys? No, none so far. Well, so.
Answer the question, sir.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't you say InDesign is a bit redundant in comparison to Illustrator?
That's a good point. Some would argue that. But Illustrator has more refined vector edited tools. I would almost say that InDesign has about maybe 60-ish% of Illustrator. Maybe some would argue more. You know, so but for some people, that 40% that it don't have is really important. But now, Illustrator maybe has like about 20, maybe it's the opposite. Illustrator only have 40% of what is in InDesign, or even less.
That's right. Is it that one is cheaper?
No, that's what I'm saying. Nowadays, they're all the same. You're paying the same $24 a month for any one of them. So that's why I'm saying that even in the world where you are using full licensed legitimate software, there is still no excuse to bend the rule or bend your back to struggle to do a 50-page document in Illustrator or, God forbid, Photoshop. Right? Where you will have a nice little 2-3 gigabyte file for attempting to do that. But anyway, you know, there's no reason for you to do that even in the legitimate world, because it is readily accessible. So when you guys go out into your architectural firms out there and they say, look, you know, you know, you have to work with the programs that the company have. You know, you will know this, you will understand it, and you are familiarized with how things are set up. So you can say, no man, we just need to switch and rent this one for this time period or whatever. But to answer your question, I would not say it's redundant InDesign, because it has vector tools, but it still does not have enough. And one of the main thing it doesn't have, InDesign does not have the flexibility of Illustrator's workspace. And we're going to look at that when we look in the practical sessions. We're going to kind of compare apples to apples. But that is a major thing. So for example, what you're going to discover when we're going to doing sheet layout, you're going to discover that InDesign is great for one sheet. But if you're doing multiple sheets coming together, you know, you're not going to get anywhere with InDesign. You're going to have to use Illustrator. Now you can use Photoshop, but Photoshop is very stiff as well as it relates to sheet design as well. And then again, as I say, there are students or persons that say, look, but I use Photoshop to do my sheet layout, and you can do it. As a matter of fact, if you try really hard, you can even do multiple sheet layout in InDesign. But doing it in Illustrator, it's like, you know, easy breezy. So anyway, but we're going to test all of those stuff out in the practical sessions, so you guys can answer that question that was asked for yourself. All right? Okay, any more questions?
Sir, I don't have a question, sir. I have a statement, sir. I haven't sent in exercise 5 again. My computer broke.
Oh, wow. As soon as you get a chance to send it in, just send it in, put it in the comments, and send an email. And, you know, as for these things, you know, I can't give you a definite guarantee, but I can say highly likely it shouldn't be a problem. You know, because in this world of, you know, where we have a lot of technical challenges, computers and internet and whatever, we are going to be as lenient as possible. But it's, you know, like any system, it can be abused. So I'm not going to guarantee 100% that will always be the case. All right? Okay, so this is what we're going to start looking at too in some of the practical sessions. You know, InDesign is really meant to accept illustrations from these tools. Images that you might edit in Photoshop and vectors that you might create in Illustrator. As a matter of fact, I mean, I know professionals who use InDesign, and because they do very little vector work, then they will only use Photoshop and InDesign, because the little diagram they have to do, they will just do it in InDesign. But you guys in architecture, you're doing a lot of diagramming, a lot of drawings, so highly likely InDesign will not fulfill that architectural appetite for graphics. So you're going to find yourself doing this kind of thing, what you're seeing on screen. You're going to be highly likely combining these three guys together, right? So InDesign has all the features in Word. And this is something that I was told. I've never really tested it yet because, you know what? Interesting thing I found is that very few people actually use Word to its fullest extent. I mean, I think Word is an awesome program. I discovered that a couple years ago when I had to do like a very complex document, and then I really started seeing, the purpose of Word. I mean, obviously it's for typing documents and things, but especially when it comes to academic writing. You guys do academic writing, right? You know about references and figures and tables. You did and an APA format and all these things, right? You would have done that last year, right, guys?
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yes, sir.
My wish for like a program like academic writing, like I wish there was like they did it with software in mind, because they teach the theory of it, but they need to like explain it as it relates to the software. Most of us going to use Word. We're not going to use typewriters. And Word has so much tools for doing these things, creating a content page and linking the pages and all of these great things. So anyway, what I'm getting at is that all of those features that Word has, if you're a Word power user, you use up all these features in Word, mail, merge, and these things. InDesign has all these features as well and more, right? So that is the first thing to note. So, I would challenge some persons that, maybe if they're going to write an essay, I'd challenge you to write it in InDesign instead of Word. And some people would be like, InDesign, that's kind of complicated. Why would I take up InDesign? It's easier to just open Word and to start typing. But I mean, it does have all the features. You guys are designers, so why not? So I put that challenge out to you guys. Whenever you're going to take up Word to do a document, take up InDesign and see how it feels. A lot of people miss the InDesign train, so I'm going to try as much as possible to make you guys appreciate it, because it will save you a whole bunch of trouble later on, especially when it comes to multi-page documents, right? Printed documents. Now, the truth of the matter is, at least for now and maybe the next year, hopefully not, we're going to be online. So you guys are not really printing. So you're not really reaping the benefit of using InDesign, because most of what you do, you're going to end up present digitally. InDesign can be used to present digitally as well, but it shines when it comes to printing. It's just like there's just no comparison with printing and laying out a multi-page document. So you're going to have to invest in this knowledge to reap the benefits of it when you do have to print. And I mean, we're still printing, even though we're in a pandemic and we're working from home. Companies still need to print. When you leave CSA and you work somewhere and you're doing an architectural, you have to do some kind of publication brief. You have to submit some kind of document, submit some kind of poster. This is when you're going to find that you're going to be piggybacking on some of these things. So, as how, like an AutoCAD or Revit is for architects and engineers and contractors, InDesign is kind of that for a publication house, right? I'm gonna say a publication house, meaning you have these places that that will edit books. They would write books. They will write articles. They do magazines. We did a little seminar a couple of weeks ago and we spoke about this, and I invited somebody who works at a publishing house to kind of explain how she uses InDesign in her workflow. And it's so very similar to how we use InDesign in architecture. The only difference is that in architecture we focus on the diagrams, but in a publication house they're going to be focused on, primarily text and typography. For us it's the diagrams, it's the plan, it's the illustrations and those things. So, this is just what I wanted to show you in this slide is just how publication works in a publication house. You have the writer, you have the editor, and all these guys do pieces of the document, and it's all put together in InDesign. Right? Think about when you have to work on a multi-page document, and I'll show you some examples in practical class, or if I can find one now. You have somebody editing the document in Photoshop, and you have somebody working on this diagram in InDesign. But then you have that person that needs to put the document together. Everything needs to flow, layout. And that is where we're going to go into the conversation of layout in the next coming weeks. So what I have here, and this is from the 99designs.com, great website for designers. Just a quick guide chart as what you do with what program. Right, so you use Photoshop when you need to touch up or correct photos, when you need to blur and smudge and warp, or when you need to composite images, right? You need to put the background, you need to change the sky. Remember we did that in exercise 1. And we need to clean up some sketches, that kind of stuff. If you need to design a logo or edit lots of text, nah, you don't want to use Photoshop. Any question on this? Nope. Okay.
No, sir.
Illustrator. When you use Illustrator, when you need to create local logos or characters, when you need to create floor plans and colored elevations, we did exactly this in our last exercise. When you need to create architectural diagrams. For us in the architectural field, like Illustrator should be like your best friend. I mean, Photoshop is your best friend as well, but not like Illustrator. And I find that it's the opposite, but it's slowly changing. Like Illustrator is the underdog and Photoshop is the famous guy. Everybody knows about Photoshop. It's a part of our culture. So we just say Photoshop. But because we work so much with lines, if you're really looking to it and invest in learning how to use these guys in the way they're intended to be used, you're going to realize that for architects who do diagrams and drawings and illustrations, you're going to find InDesign to be your best friend. Right? You're definitely not going to use InDesign to edit images or do a multi-page document. When you're doing a project, especially for print, you're not going to want to use Illustrator to do that. And for heaven's sake, do not use Photoshop to do a multi-page document. I mean, it's not impossible, but no. Alright? Okay. And when should you use InDesign? Look how short this list is. And this is why I tell you that you're not using InDesign to do much. When you need to do a multi-page document or anything that is text heavy, and when you need to prepare prints for a booklet. I mean, that list is so short. But that is like the number one use of InDesign. So you're not really doing any heavy lifting in InDesign. It's just kind of a delivery mechanism. Right? All right, so we're going to start looking at some of these things, and guess what? You guys are going to start seeing some cross-referencing with your design studio, because some of these lessons that we learn here is applicable not just in computing but in everything. But we're just going to focus on it as it relates to the computing part of it. So let's check out this video.
Let's start small with a simple point.
What's the point?
Together, points make a line. Line has direction, weight, gesture.
Oops, my bad. Let's go again.
Gesture, spirit. Let's start small with a simple point.
What's the point?
Together, points make a line. Line has direction, weight, gesture.
Gesture?
Spirit, gestalt, life. Lines then combine to make two-dimensional objects that we call shapes.
Or an outline?
Or a silhouette. These shapes are regular and geometric. Others may be irregular and organic. When put together, shapes can define one another.
You mean they contrast?
Right. Contrast is a fundamental principle of design. The juxtaposition of dissimilar elements creates tension.
Sounds easy enough.
Well, it isn't just black and white. These colors
Yes,
Yes, sir.
Hearing you. No.
No, sir.
Well, it isn't just black and white. These colors are organized in a wheel that maps complementary tones like warm and cool. Color is defined by hue, how we normally reference color by names like yellow and green. Saturation, the dominance of hue in color. And value, otherwise known as lightness or darkness. Color is the first regular and organic. When put together, shows lightness or darkness. Color is the first element the mind sees and the last it forgets.
Yeah, but how do I pull this all together?
Composition is emphasis on a focal point against a background strengthened through scale. Whether radial, symmetrical, or asymmetrical, composition is...
This is getting exhaustive.
Then let's speed up the rhythm, which provides order in composition. Repetition and variation in groups creates a pattern.
And what if you need to get more specific?
Spell it out. Typeface, whether traditional serif or a modern sans serif can act as a product's voice.
And if that falls flat?
Form is the three-dimensional partner of shape. Forms can be basic, complex, and often merged together. On this surface, we find texture: matte, glossy, rough, smooth.
Kinda seems like a whole new world.
Negative space creates a mold around the positive space of form.
Okay, but should we use all these tools at once?
No. Aim for harmony and simplicity, the concert of separate elements. Design is the careful balance of these principles. Our goal is to create clear, consistent emotional connections. And with a common visual vocabulary,
We can make brands iconic.
you've got it.
Well, my objective here is that you guys should be able to create great architectural layouts, and whether it's for digital or print, and we're going to try and do both because we are living in a digital age now, but you are going to be needing to print, right? All of those workplaces out there that are doing remote work, they still got to print. They still got to submit drawings. They still have to do presentations. They still have to do brochures and all of those things, even though we are working remotely. So we're going to have to do both. So we're going to start looking at some of these things, principles of design and elements of design, and we're going to see how both of these come together to do layouts and composition. So that is how we're going to be focusing on using InDesign as it relates to layouts and composition. All right, and what we're going to be using to do this is going to be your Design Studio. It should be a project one, and you're going to lay this out for your you're going to lay it out using some of these techniques learned. All right, now we're going to go into that in the next class. We get all the details and we will see how our next mission that we'll be proceeding to. So we're going to continue with the exercises, and then we're actually going to move into assignment 1, right, which is going to be loads of fun, but we'll talk about that next class. All right, guys, so that is pretty much it for this class. Any questions thus far? All right, so, and I heard some persons talking, apparently it does seem like WhatsApp is down or giving some kind of trouble or something. So if I saw some persons trying to reach out to me, I don't, not only from your class but from other classes as well, but I'm unable to reach out back to you, so we're gonna have to use email and all of that until it comes up back. All right, so I guess this is where we will end it for today, and then we will continue on this on Wednesday. So on Wednesday you need to come with your InDesign ready to go. Don't throw away your SketchUp, because now we're going to be working both. We're going to be continuing with SketchUp, but we're going to be learning InDesign, and we're going to kind of hopscotch between the two, because we really only have one class to do it. So and we can't do one then the other, so we're going to have to kind of double up a little bit so that we can get through everything. All right, okay guys, so I will see you on Wednesday if there are no more questions. Nope. All right, going once, going twice. All right, so I'll see you guys on Wednesday. Alrighty. All right, take it easy and stay safe. I need to fix that. How can I fix that? Like, I did not expect